Hey YouTubers, welcome back to another episode of Small Engines Questions and Answers for Friday, July 29th, 2011. And before I get started, I want to thank everybody for all the gifts that they've sent me. I've received a few monetary gifts from people from the United States and some tools. So I got all these tools here from a YouTuber called Carnet99. And here's another ratchet, kind of like the one he sent me the last time. It's the same guy who sent me this one previously, which I showed in the previous Q&A video. Anyways, I like these because you can push to get the socket off. This little lever here goes from forward to reverse, and it's Craftsman and it's made in the USA. And I really like these screwdrivers here, especially the black ones because they're kind of industrial. They're really tough. I'd like to get a whole set of these in smaller screwdrivers like that. That would be really great. If anybody knows where I can get these, let me know because I'm having a hard time to find them in Canada here. These ones here are all Craftsman as well. These are some nut drivers here. There's the sizes, 5/16 and so forth. And here's some wire strippers. It's made by Gardner Bender from the US. And they seem like a really good pair. Here's a caliper. It's made in Japan. It's not digital as you can see, but it looks to be of good quality. I'd have to learn how to use these types of measures because I'm used to only the digital ones. And a special thanks to Carnet99 for all these tools. Now the first question today is some people ask me, do spark plugs come pre-gapped? Well, the answer to that is yes and no. Some plugs do come pre-gapped and some don't. Some you have to set the gap yourself with a spark plug gap tool. Now some of these plugs like the BPR5ES from NGK are sometimes good to go right out of the box. You can stick it in your lawnmower and not really worry about the gap. You should always check the gap though because during manufacturing or transportation this could have been bumped and it could change the gap on you. So always make sure with your spark plug gap tool that the gap's good anyways. So for those of you who are not familiar with gapping a spark plug, if you take it out of the package, it should run okay for you. But if there's no gap here between the two metal parts, just make sure to spread it out a bit like that. Because if both parts are touching, it will not work. And if you're not sure how to use the spark plug gap tool, I do have a video that shows how to use it, and I will post it under the description of this video. If you're not sure what the spark plug gap should be, you can always check with the manufacturer of your power equipment to see what they recommend. Another question I often get is what kind of compression tester should I get for small engines? Well, you can buy a specific compression tester for small engines, but you do not necessarily have to do that. Here's the compression tester I have, and it came with different adapters. That's so you can screw in the tester in different spark plug holes. Now I bought this tester at Canadian Tire here in Canada for 50 bucks. It came with all the adapters and it's meant for automotive and small engines. And if you do get one, I suggest you get one with the braided hose here because it's way more flexible and it's going to last a lot longer. You can also buy a cheaper one, but you may not have all the adapters that you're going to end up needing. So you don't have to spend a whole lot of money to get one. Get a good one though. Make sure it's got all the adapters and make sure that the cord's braided if possible. Another question I often get is people ask me, how come does the chain want to keep turning on my chainsaw when it's idling? The most common cause of this is that the idle setting on the carburetor is set too high. So in other words, the screw is set so that the engine will idle a bit too fast. It may not really spin the chain fast enough to cut, but it's always going to want to keep turning. The second common causes of this that I come across is that the clutch springs are worn out or broken, and this causes the clutch to engage prematurely. For those of you who are not familiar as to where the clutch is, it's right underneath this cover here. And I do have a clutch from another saw here in my hand, so I don't have to take that cover off. But here's the spring inside the clutch. So if you had set your carburetor idle and it was fine that way, and it was still wanting to turn, what you would do is replace the small spring here in the clutch, and that would cure the problem. So when the clutch is worn out, these parts on the clutch are going to expand prematurely, thus making the chain turn a bit. Now these springs are not expensive, so I do recommend that if you have this problem, just replace them right away. My next question today is in regards to overhead valve covers that are leaking oil. The first and obvious thing you'd want to do is make sure that all 4 bolts are nice and snug. Well, the first thing you could do is take it off and replace the gasket. It's a pretty easy job. All you have to do is remove the 4 bolts that hold the cover on. You may have to pry it off with a screwdriver if it's stuck on there. Get your new gasket that's going to be the exact fit, and you can also add a bit of RTV silicone. You can use the red stuff or you can use the black stuff. Just apply a small film on both sides of the gasket, then put the whole cover back on, and you're not going to have a leak there anymore. And make sure you have not overfilled the engine with too much oil. The other day somebody emailed me telling me that they removed all 4 bolts from the cover and they still couldn't get it off. What usually causes this is the old gasket maker that's between the cover and the engine. You can tab the cover with a rubber mallet, make sure not to bend it too much, and you can also use a screwdriver and go in there and pry all along the cover. If it bends a bit, just bend it back when you put the cover back on, and repeat this process all around the cover with the screwdriver or a really large chisel or something like that, and just pry it off slowly and it's going to come off. Now every time you take the cover off, you should replace the gasket if it's broken, and every time I remove a cover and put it back on, I always use the RTV silicone. My last question today is in regards to these 3.5 Briggs & Stratton engines on lawnmowers. Somebody was asking me about a throttle lever on these. Well, sometimes there's a little lever right here that if you move it back like this, it'll go slower. If you move it this way, it's going to go faster. If you've moved the lever all the way to the left and the engine still won't rev high enough, what you need to do is remove the air filter. Now you can either replace this spring or cut a notch out, rebend it to make it tighter. The tighter this spring is, the faster your engine's going to run. The more loose it is, the slower your engine's going to run. So if you have a lawnmower and it's running too low, you've tried everything with the lever, like I said, just tighten up the spring, replace it, and that should cure the problem. If it's running too fast, then maybe the spring is too tight. You can either pull it to stretch it or just buy a new spring. That should cure your problem. Make sure before you mess around with this spring that the carburetor is clean and that you have a new diaphragm inside that carburetor. So that'll be it for today. Hopefully you've learned a few tricks in today's Q&A. Keep the questions coming. If I don't respond, it's not because they're not important, it's just I'm too busy. But I do take note of all the questions sent to me and I try to include them in future Q&As like this. So thanks again for watching. Have a great weekend and we'll see you next Friday.